Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Week That Really Was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for this last week of summer, the week ending the 30th of August, 2024. Sarah is back from holidays and kids back to school, and the long misery of winter begins. How are you, Sarah?
I'm grand. It was the best holiday ever. It was long and hot, and I came back and it's been raining ever since. So
Yeah, that's what we had for the last 3 weeks while you were gone, by the way. You could have brought some sunshine home with you, but anyway, we'll get into the agenda for the week that was, because it is back to school week. Your kids are back to school. My wife is back at school. She's teaching. My friend who drives the school bus is back at school, and Enoch Burke is back at school down in the Midlands. And I thought we might start there because it's a topical story, and it seems very likely that he's going to go back to prison. What was your take on that, or do you have a take on that, or have you formed an opinion of it, or have you just sort of tuned it out?
I think my take on this is changing all the time because I think it probably won't come as a screaming surprise to anybody who listens to this podcast that his basic point I 100% agree with. And where this all started from, I agree with. But I think that he's making it really difficult for anybody to do him any favors here. He's back at the school. He's allegedly attempting to attend a staff meeting. And while I agree with his point, where he's going to go back to jail, he obviously wants to go back to jail. So I think from a legal standpoint, he puts the courts in a position where they have to put him back in jail. And I'm not sure where he wants this to end, or what the point of it is anymore. And like I said, I'm someone who supports his basic point in that he should not be, obliged to call any student by, random pronouns that they've decided, and he shouldn't, he should be allowed to object to that. But I think that his point after a while gets lost in the charade that this has become, and I don't think that benefits the cause that he's trying to advocate for.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said there, except one thing, where you said you thought that he probably wanted to go back to prison. I don't think that. I don't think he wants to go to prison. I think that's an important point. I think this is genuine conviction taken to its logical endpoint, where he genuinely is prepared to spend the rest of his life in prison on contempt of court charges. And he genuinely is, every time they let him out of prison, going to go back to that school. If they keep him in prison between now and 2042 and they let him out for the summer, he'll still go back, because I think it is genuine principle. And the question for me is, it really is a case study in, like, when does genuine principle become your enemy? Like, I like to think of myself as a principled person. I like to think that I will say things that are unpopular if I think they're right.
Yeah.
I like to think I will do things that are unpopular if I think they're right, or if I think something needs to be said that isn't being said. I will say it rather than shy away for the sake of popularity.
Well, you're the editor of
I
Gript, so I
wouldn't.
think that kind of goes without saying, John. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, but I wouldn't do what Enoch is doing. I mean, I have said, for example, Sarah, I have said that if they want to come into my house and charge me for not paying a television license, they can do that. And if they want to send me to prison for not paying a television license, they can do that for, I guess, up to a couple of months. But at some
Yes.
point, I would say I've made my point now. I also have a life to live. I also have the rest of my life and I mean, to make a religious point, that God gave me. How am I going to spend the rest of that life? Am I going to spend it doing something productive, or am I going to spend it sitting in a cell? And I think that is where I get off the boat with Enoch. There are people listening to this and watching this who will admire him greatly, who will say, fair play to him. The country would be better if more people had that kind of conviction. I'm not sure it would. I'm not sure a country works if there are people who are that, when being that level of principle becomes intransigent and that's self-destructive. So I agree with everything you said except that point, which is I don't think he wants to go back to prison. I think he feels like he has no other choice and he's going to stick it out for as long as it takes. But so are the courts, for reasons we can talk about.
Yeah, well, I admire him. I think he took a stand on something that, and this is obviously going back a while, and he took a stand on something, and he was kind of ridiculed for it, and I think he was right in what he was saying, and I think that there is a lot of people out there who have an admiration for his steely determination. I just think that it gets to a point, as you say, where, I mean, is he just going to spend his life in jail in forever? Like, is that a good use of his time? I don't think so. But as you say, if that's what he chooses to do, and that's what he chooses to make his life about, well, I mean, I suppose that's his choice. But it's becoming a bit farcical, and I think that his point that he's making is getting lost in the weeds.
Yeah. And there's another point here as well, which is that the courts have an equally strong case on principle.
Yeah.
They do. I mean, you only have to imagine. It's always good in these situations, in any situation like this, it's always good to imagine what you would think were the shoe on the other foot. So if you're somebody who supports Enoch Burke and is sympathetic to Enoch Burke, imagine a situation where the courts had sided with him and said, no, the school was wrong to discipline you, the school was wrong to sack you, the school was wrong to make you say those things or believe you had to say those things, and we are ordering the school to pay Enoch Burke compensation and give him his job back as an order of the court. Now imagine the principal of the school came out and said, no, sorry, we're not doing it. He's not coming back on these premises. We're not paying him a penny, and he can stand outside in the rain. We're not letting him in. In those circumstances, would people think the courts should enforce their orders? I think they probably would, and I think they'd be right. Or imagine a completely non-Enoch related situation. I mean, let's imagine that there's a woman out there somewhere, and I'm not comparing Enoch in any way, I'm comparing the situation, but there's a woman out there somewhere who's being stalked by a man, and the court says, here's a court order, you're not to go near her house. And the man shows up outside her house anyway. Would people say that court order should be breached? You either have, the courts have the ability to order you to do things, or they don't. And in circumstances where you're saying, well, I'm not going to obey the orders of the court, but I think the other side should, then you're not really engaging with the system at all. Maybe that's your choice. Maybe you say, I don't trust the system, it's broken, I don't want to engage with it. But you can't blame the system for enforcing its own rules equally on everybody. So that's the other angle there that I think is a little bit sad. And I think that's where there's a degree of hypocrisy on the Burke side, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that we also, as a society, get kind of obsessed with things, and I think this has become a kind of a national pastime now, and it's not going to change. It's going to be this kind of joke, like at Valentine's Day, there was these cards knocking around, "I'll never leave you," with a cartoon of Enoch Burke, and it's kind of become sort of. And I kind of thought that when he got out at the start of the summer, it was obviously lined up to be with the summer holidays. And now the schools are back. He's back. So there's no sign of this changing. It'll just roll and roll, but no one's gonna blink. So here we are.
Yeah, well, he'll be back in Mountjoy shortly, I would imagine. I can't see the court. He's literally giving the courts no other option. I mean, what other option do the courts have? Put yourself in the situation where, he's showing up outside the school, he's coming onto school property, he's going into meetings. I mean, we can sympathize with him. And again, I want to emphasize, I and Sarah both think he was right in his initial disposition. Completely correct. It is absolute nonsense to tell teachers that they have to refer to students with pronouns that do not fit their biological sex. Absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
But he's in the position he is now largely because he didn't hire a law firm to represent him. He didn't represent himself in court, had a lot of arguments with judges, got outfoxed on legal points, and now he's in this position where he's showing up at a school that doesn't want him there to go into meetings when a court has ordered him not to do so. I mean, there's principle and there's playing smart. So, yeah.
And it's a missed opportunity. But it was a missed opportunity to make the point and win the point, which is a winnable point, which is that teachers should not be mandated to use pronouns for children if they don't agree with it. And I think a lot of people would agree with that basic point, and I think it was a missed opportunity to argue that point and win it on behalf of teachers.
Well, maybe there'll be another opportunity, but this one is just turning into the circus is back in town. Anyway, we've got other things to talk about. We got in trouble a couple of weeks ago because people said we didn't talk about the stabbing that happened in Galway outside the army barracks where an Irish army chaplain was stabbed by an assailant. And I want to say to listeners and to watchers that the reason for that, the reason we didn't talk about it in that episode, was that it actually happened the day after we recorded. So we record always on a Thursday. This event happened on a Friday, and we didn't get to it, and that's why. And I did, if you're reading Gript.ie, I wrote a piece, and we did lots of extensive coverage on the website of that story and all the different angles to it. But what was your take on it, Sarah? Because it immediately became, I mean, like the Irish Times did an article on that the day after, in which they started talking about the dangers of the far right, which was just laughable.
It's just the dangers of the far right or far anything. It's a violent incident, which, like, if you take all the politics out of it and you don't like have a position on who the ethnicity or anything or anybody, and you just say, as population of Ireland grows and we become more multicultural, and just by sheer numbers alone, incidents of violence, random acts of violence, which used to be quite rare in Ireland, are going to increase. That's the nature of human beings all being put together. And everybody doing these kind of like linguistic gymnastics to avoid, you know, saying what it is and the like what exactly happened is another example of how we don't want to have hard conversations about the nature of Ireland changing as a country. And I thought it was another interesting episode in our current discourse, which is, you know, talk about this in any million ways, figure out a way to blame it on the far right, and, you know, box it up, package it up in its new wrapping paper of bad far right, you know, people are being bad, and never ever ever to have a hard conversation about what it might be about. And by the way, it also might just be about nothing. Like sometimes, you know, people like have mental health issues and they stab people. It happens, you know, like it's happened before, it'll happen again. It's not always about, you know, political.
Well, in fairness, this lad did say his motive was related to the Irish Army's activities in, I think, Mali in Africa.
I appreciate that, but I'm just saying sometimes it's not about.
No, you're right.
Sometimes it can just but my point is that before, I mean, obviously this is a person who is, you know, not of sound mind, has become radicalized about a political issue. That's besides the point. But what I'm saying is that the rush to blame it on something is always quite astounding. And it doesn't mean that all immigrants are bad if one of them stabs an Irish priest. But you like the avoidance of having that hard conversation is just stunning to watch. And if he had come out and said, if he was a Irish guy from Coolock who stabbed a person who wasn't Irish, there'd be a huge rush to say that they were radicalized online by the far right and they did this and they did that. And what frustrates me is that we never have like with like. We never have the same treatment of one thing for another. And this was just another example of that.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I agree with almost all you said, but you did say one thing I disagreed with, where you said clearly this person wasn't of sound mind. And that phrase always triggers me a little bit because I think it gets used too much in relation to these cases. Oh, he stabbed somebody, therefore he must clearly have been mad. Like the guy who, you know, we've no idea what defense, for example, we employed in the Parnell Square stabbing case, but I would not be surprised, nor would many be surprised, if there was some kind of insanity defense. Same thing in the incident in the UK just a couple of weeks ago. I think a lot of these crimes are actually quite calculated. That's why it's called terrorism. They're calculated to, you know, create fear. And it's not always a madman. Somebody can rationally sit down and think, I'm going to commit this terrible crime because of the reaction it will create. That's happened. I mean, you see it in the US with copycat serial killers, or indeed serial killers developing a particular MO, and they get off on the notoriety of it. I think it's wrong to assume that because somebody commits a terrible crime like that or gets radicalized in that way that they're not of sound mind. The problem with radicalization is that it does affect people of sound mind. Sometimes actually very intelligent people who start to believe that actually there's only one solution. They've rationally gone through all the other ones, and there's only one solution, which is violence. So yeah, there's that. But in terms of the whole narrative around why it happened and how it happened and where this guy came from and all the rest of it, I mean, it is very clear and has been for some time that there is an issue in Ireland with Islamic terrorism. You see that, and it's not normally expressed in violence on our shores, it's normally we're making arrests because people are raising money here, they're sending money elsewhere, they're maybe sending fighters overseas to fight for. I mean, we saw what happened with the lady from Dundalk, Lisa Smith. There is radicalization happening in that community, and we don't talk about it because it is true that the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful. And you always have to say that. You have to say, well, it's true, the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful, like we're assuming they're not. But on the flip side, if you flip that over to the right wing or to the far right, in inverted commas, that caveat is never made. No one ever says, but of course, the vast majority of far right protesters are peaceful. Do you know that? That's never said. There's a distinct attitude that you are the same as the worst among you if we disagree with you. So if, for example, that stabbing had been committed by some, and there's no guarantee, by the way, that somebody, some lunatic won't take up arms in the cause of what he sees as right on the immigration debate or free speech or something else. There's no guarantee that won't happen. But if and when it does, you won't see people coming out to say, oh, this is an isolated incident and the vast majority of people with concerns about this issue are peaceful and peace-loving.
No.
That won't happen. So, yeah, that's the double standard that's really at play. Instead, it'll be that we're all, I mean, you and I will get the blame if that happens. It'll be McGurk and Ryan on their podcast talking about immigration.
You in particular, and Gript.
Yeah.
And Gript, and, you know, like we're all the same, and we're the sum of we are the sum of the worst of us, and they are the worst of them is just an isolated incident, nothing to see here, move along. And that's the thing.
Well, we might as well say, as I say, we might as well say, for the record, if that day ever comes, Sarah and I are telling people right now that violence of any kind is abhorrent and shouldn't be engaged in.
Of course.
And that's our position, and shouldn't need to be said. But, you know, let the record show, lest there ever be any attempt to link that, because it will happen. And you never know. You just simply never know where somebody is going to come from with a crazy idea. That's the unfortunate reality of the world we live in today. So, anyway. Oh, geez, I feel like a smoke now after talking about that, but of course we can't do that anymore, according to Keir Starmer in the UK. I'm just going to let you rant on this one because it's a fascinating story, and it's definitely going to happen here. If they pass this law in the UK, they're going to pass it here, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, we would never let an opportunity go by for an anti-crack measure. You know what I mean? Like, this is too much of a gift if the UK do it. So the proposal is to ban smoking beer gardens, right? Which is where all the fun is at. And again, like, I mean, okay, for starters, I would say it kind of warmed the soul to see that Ireland isn't the only place that is making up fake solutions to fake problems because they can't be bothered addressing any of the real ones. So, you know, sometimes we can get bogged down, John, in thinking that we live in a kind of a unique place where, you know, they just come up with problems to fix because they can't do the hard work or whatever. But, you know, we're not alone. The UK is the same, and they're doing it. And, you know, 100%, I've already seen articles today. Would you agree with this? Would you support that? This is to start the conversation to do it here. First of all, it's not that big of it's not a problem. If you're in a beer garden, like, people are smoking. I mean, deal. And I mean, I smoke sometimes. You smoke sometimes. Would that be inaccurate?
My mother watches this podcast. I'm kidding. Yes, I do smoke sometimes.
I'm a kind of I dabble in smoking when I have a drink. So I am the person who might be having a cigarette in a beer garden. And I think it's nonsense. I think it's more nanny state crap. I'm all for the smoking ban indoors. That makes scientific sense, like, because of smoking. But if you're in a beer garden in an open air, I just don't agree that that's a big problem. And I think it's, again, more to be seen to be doing something for not a problem because, you know, God forbid we'd fix something legitimate. And it's kind of silly season stuff. But I think that people should be allowed to smoke outside. I mean, for God's sake.
I bet you that puts you in a minority.
I don't think so.
That's my guess.
I don't think so. I think that people, like, where are you supposed to be allowed to smoke then? In your house?
Yeah, maybe a designated area on top of the mountain, 76 miles away from you, and only if you pay €50 to get into it or something.
Look, if you're an
I
adult,
think
you're an adult, and adults are in beer gardens and adults are drinking. And by the way, a lot of adults in Ireland are in the beer garden smoking and then they're going into the toilet and doing cocaine. Is anyone going to do something about that? No. But let's stop them from smoking outside because they're too stupid and fat and thick to figure out their own lives. So let's intrude on them again. But like, God forbid we'd actually address a real problem. That's what I think.
Do you know, it's funny. I'm always fascinated by this contrast that exists in society where we are at once the most libertine society that's ever lived and at the same time the most Puritan society that's ever lived. So like we live in a world where, in a society and a culture which says, lads, have as many sexual partners as you can. Do drugs. Go and like see the world. Live in a hippie commune. Alternative. Be a cyclist. But don't smoke and don't drink. And don't you dare have more than 2 pints in the airport. That's Michael O'Leary's new one. He wants to restrict the amount of pints you have before you get in a plane. And don't you dare smoke in a beer garden in a pub because that's bad for you. But all that other stuff, go and do that. That's phenomenal. I was joking about the cyclists, by the way. It's just a stereotype. But so on the one hand, we're sending this signal that like we live in this really libertine society. God forbid anyone should suggest something like censoring hardcore pornography on phones that kids get access to, but adults can't smoke in a beer garden. And I keep trying to figure out why this is, and I have a theory, and I want you to tell me if any of this sounds sensible to you. So I think that a lot of the people who are like in favor of all that not lefty liberal, but all that kind of liberal, libertine, new age lifestyle stuff, are the kind of people who have never done it and kind of imagine themselves as being that kind of cool and out there and free spirited. But loads of people smoke and drink, and a lot of them tend to be sort of people in the north of England who wear Newcastle shirts and sing 2 World Wars and 1 World Cup with the Germans. So there's a sense of kind of moral superiority or kind of cultural elitism related to some activities and kind of lower status assigned to things like smoking and drinking. So I think there's a large degree of cultural snobbery at play. Do you think do you think it's just as simple as governments like banning things?
No, I mean, I think that it's like the way. So we're similar age, and there's kind of an idea. There certainly was that like you couldn't really be an alcoholic unless you were a middle-aged man, and like you were kind of in the pub all the time. And I remember reading an article a few years ago how like the largest group or growing group of alcoholics was kind of like middle-class women who were drinking wine at home alone. But that doesn't conjure up the same kind of, do you know what I mean? Like kind of disdain in society because it's a class thing. We, in Ireland, one of the things I always say to people when I'm having a conversation about some of the issues I have with Ireland is that in Ireland, we like to pretend we live in a classless society. And that, hierarchy and class is a thing that exists in England and it's terrible. And they have lords and they have this and they have that. And we're not like that. We're all the same. And it's bullshit. We do live in a class society. We do live in a tiered society. We have one rule and a way, an approach of talking about certain groups of society and another for another. And that is demonstrated in the way we talk about alcoholism, for example, the way we talk about certain lifestyles, the way we talk about a protest in Coolock versus somewhere else. And we all pat ourselves on the back and pretend we don't live in a class society. We do. We live in a class society. We live in a society where, I remember hearing years ago, and it was, I remember being really like, that really is true. And I'd never noticed it before. There was a guy on the radio complaining, and he was making running a campaign about how when on Irish ads on TV and radio, they were displaying, like, say for like a house alarm, or whatever, that the person doing the burglary always had a specific accent. And he was right. He was saying that when criminals are shown in ads, TV, film, not Coronation Street, Fair City, or whatever it is, they always have a Dublin accent. And he was right. And we pretend that we don't live in that society, but we do. And we do live in a society that judges people based on what they eat, what they, and the government, a lot of the time with this kind of nanny state stuff, or how many drinks you can have in the airport or whatever, it's classism dressed up as something else. But call it what it is. It's a class snobbery. You know it and I know it. But nobody ever calls it out.
It is, which is why, as you've been talking about this, I've been thinking about something else that happened during the week, which was the naked cycle through Cork. Did you see that?
John, honestly, if I thought burning my eyes out would unsee that, I'd do it. But yes, I did.
Be fair, Sarah. It was a cold day. You know what the weather's been like.
It's disgusting. I'm sorry. It's disgusting. I'm sorry. But like, why do you need to be naked? Why do you need to be cycling and painting your body? It's just attention seeking shite. I'm sorry. I'm over it. Performative, weird, like, no. Why are you cycling through a city that has children in it, naked, middle-aged men naked in front of kids? It's just creepy. I'm sorry.
What did you think of Dan Boyle going to greet them? Did you notice how Dan Boyle was standing in that photograph? I thought that was fascinating. Like, his hands are covering his own equipment, which might be a natural.
He's fully clothed.
Might just a bit. Yeah, no, he's fully clothed. But like, I just thought it was fascinating. It was fascinating. No, he's fully clothed. Yeah. But I really kind of thought it was like a kind of a self-conscious, I really don't want to be here kind of thing. Yes, he felt he had to be there, I think. And that comes back to the conversation we're having about the sort of classism in society, because that kind of activity, nude cycling through the streets of Cork to raise awareness about road safety for cyclists, that is the most upper middle class thing you could possibly think of. Absolutely. I mean, there's no working class person in Ireland to do that. Not one. Imagine going into a working class community and go, here, will you come with me and we're going to get on our bikes and we're going to cycle naked to raise awareness of road safety into the Oireachtas. Yeah,
to raise awareness of road safety. Like, what are you talking about? Like, why do you have to be naked? I don't know. It's just it's it's like the old thing where the famous Hollywood actor, he gets caught that he's been riding rings around himself on his wife, and he goes into the clinic because he has sex addiction, and the guy from Coolock who's doing that is just a pervert. Like, it's like one rule for one class of people and another rule for other people. So naked cycling and painting yourself, you're a activist for cycling safety. But like, really, anywhere else, no one would do that. And it's weird and creepy. And that's a hill I'll die on. It's weird and creepy as a middle-aged man to cycle naked through the cities. And, at one point, the police would have gotten involved in something like that.
Ben actually emailed the police emailed the Gardaí during the week, Ben Scout, and he was like, come here, I have a question for you now, he said. Yeah. Is this against the law? And they replied, and very curt from the Garda press office, and very curt, they were like, this office does not dispense legal advice, which is at once technically the correct answer, but also kind of like screw you, we don't have to answer this one, we got you on technicality, because of course they don't dispense legal advice. That's not their job. But, one might wonder why it is that the Gardaí have nothing to say about what amounts to public indecency. I mean, why is it public indecency if I was to, but I'm not going to do this, but if I was to like wander into town tomorrow and wander naked past the local primary school, that would be public indecency and I'd be surrounded up. Why is that meaningfully different than if I put paint on myself and cycle through the centre of a city with no clothes on?
Because you're not part of a protected activist class of people in Ireland who can do whatever they want because they're morally superior to the rest of us.
Yeah, it's like the idea of tasteful nudity versus kind of pervy nudity. I don't really understand it, to be honest with you.
Be tastefully nude in your own house, for God's sake. Be tastefully nude in the privacy of your own home. Or go on holidays to a weird place where you can be tastefully nude with other weirdos on a beach somewhere. But you don't get to be tastefully nude on your bike in a city. Okay? Like, let's just, can we just go back? Can we just all take a step back and reestablish a couple of ground rules about who we are and how we'd like to live? And I'd like to start by saying, can we just agree that you shouldn't cycle in the nip through the city? no matter what the cause is, because there's kids there and it's weird and creepy. And I don't want to have to explain to my kids why there's a painted naked man cycling down the street. If you don't mind, if it's all the same to your whatever your new woke cool cause is, can you just be in the nip in your gaff and keep your meat and two veg out of my face?
And if we really must have nudists, can they look like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie? They never do they? No, it's never. No. Why
that's very. You shouldn't. No, John, don't be body shaming people.
I'm not body shaming people. I mean, I'm just like, people can be proud of their bodies if they want. I'm just saying, personally, I would prefer if we had nudists that they would look like Brad and Angelina. But they never.
I'd prefer if they all just dressed themselves. That's okay.
That's fair. That's a fair compromise. If we can't have Brad and Angelina, we'll go with clothes.
I mean, we're literally regressing. We're regressing. Like words I thought I would never have to say. Can we just I used to say on the podcast, like, we're not doing enough thinking and we should have real debates about different things. And now we're going so far back that now I'm like, okay, let's start. Can you dress yourselves? That's okay. Thanks.
Yeah. All fascinating, but you can't have more than 2 pints in the airport, and you shouldn't smoke in smoking areas in pubs. I don't know. Maybe if they organise a nudist smoking area in a pub, we could smoke there. Who knows? All right, look, we've talked enough about that. Let's move on, because you said before we came in here you want to talk about the Pavel Durov case. He's the guy who founded Telegram and now finds himself at the mercy of French prosecutors for, apparently, his supporters say, the crime of facilitating free speech.
Yeah. So, well, I think it's an interesting, because, well, I think what's happened is that the kind of move towards the hate speech bill in Ireland, and then obviously across the world, we're always hearing about, well, the consequences will be this and the consequences will be that. And now we're starting to see, what the consequences will be. And I think it's really interesting, because this is happening, and the backdrop here is that Simon Harris is saying that the hate speech bill in Ireland will be passed during the lifetime of this government. Now, I don't think anybody is really even disagreeing anymore that the election is going to be in November. So we're now basically in September, October. So he's basically saying that the hate speech bill is going to be passed in the next 8 weeks. Would that be a correct assessment?
Yeah, I think what happened there was John Lee had a story in the Irish Mail on Sunday last, basically saying, quoting a senior minister, an unnamed senior minister, saying, yeah, this thing is dead, pack it up, it's not going anywhere. I think then Simon Harris got a question on that, and he had to kind of deny it. So he's like, no, absolutely, we're going to pass this bill, we're going to pass it before the election. I would not be surprised if, unfortunately, he fully intended to pass it before the election, but then the election just came and there was nothing he could do about it. I still am not confident of its prospects of passage. But the Durov guy, I mean, I don't
believe his pre-election promise, John.
Well, this is not a pre-election promise, because he will have broken it if he calls the election without passing the hate speech bill, and I think he's going to break it, and I think he's going to call the election without passing the hate speech bill. Why would you try that? It'd be politically insane. I mean, we saw the kind of reaction it got the last time. People are still really angry about it. He's trying to get people to forget that they were mad at Fine Gael so that they might give them out number one, or indeed number 2 or 3. So there's no way he's going to do that. If he does, he's not half the politician I thought he was, because I do think he's a very capable politician, and you have to recognize that in people you disagree with. But on the Pavel Durov thing, are you familiar with the case of a guy called Ross Ulbricht?
Remind me. Sounds familiar.
So Ross Ulbricht, yeah, he was a guy who founded, back in the early days, of something called the dark web, which is really just a bunch of hidden websites that are accessed through a specific internet browser. He founded something called the Silk Road. And the Silk Road was essentially a drugs trading website where people would go on and you could basically order your cannabis or your cocaine or whatever it was from somebody in one state, and they would send it in the post to another state. And all this Ulbricht guy did, he didn't sell the drugs himself. He didn't buy the drugs, as far as I know. He was simply facilitating the trade, and he's actually serving something like 7 or 8 life sentences in the US. Now, a life sentence in the US is nothing like a life sentence here. Life sentence in the US, they add them on consecutively. Like, there are people in the US serving 1,700 year sentences where they're literally not getting out of prison for 1,700 years. Ross Ulbricht is serving a sentence like that because the state alleged that he mightn't have been dealing the drugs, but he was facilitating it. He was central to facilitating what was going on. Now, with the Durov thing, I assume that the French case against him is going to be something very similar. It is going to be, they're going to find specific examples of illegality. Let's say Telegram being used to share underage child sex abuse images, which I think it has been in the past, and pin that on him.
Yeah, but then why not Apple? Why, like, iPhones are used to download child pornography, child rape imagery. Like, why not? Unless they have evidence that he knowingly, participated in it, like, then you might as well be arresting the owner of these pencils for whatever I write. Do you know what I mean? Like, he can't be taking responsibility for now. Like, the whole Silk Road thing is kind of complicated because I remember it wasn't just drugs, there was mad stuff. If memory serves, there was a fascinating case in America of a woman who had a roommate who was trying to kill her and had bought I can't remember what the name of the bacteria, but basically, like, she bought flesh-eating bacteria on Silk Road and was putting it on her friend's. Her friend had an operation and she was putting it on the wound on her back and infected her with flesh-eating. Yeah, sick. But
she got those on the Silk Road, did she? Okay.
I'm pretty sure. Now I'll have to check that. But anyway, the point is that I remember Silk Road being quite dark, like not just drugs, but all kinds of mad stuff. But still,
well, everything on the dark web is quite dark by definition.
Yeah, the clue is in the name. But I mean, I think that, like, with the Silk Road thing, you could say that it was deliberately established to conduct criminal activity online outside the view of authorities. So you could establish a motive of some sort there to participate in criminality. Telegram is just a communication device. You can't like the precedent that would be set here would be that Telegram, WhatsApp, that the founder or owner of these companies is responsible for everything that happens. So no one's going to ever. I mean, they'd have to be shut down. But it's the logical consequence of these kind of hate speech laws, which is that they're not thought out at all, and that ultimately you can't make people responsible for hurty words on the internet, which is basically what this is.
No, I agree with you, and I mean, I also think there's another angle here as well, which is I understand that Telegram is very widely used in Russia. It's very popular amongst sort of Russian soldiers and Russian military bloggers and all that kind of stuff. And I know that community was particularly upset by what happened in France this week and believe that they're being targeted, that it's actually an anti-Russian measure. I have no knowledge of whether that's the case or it's not, but it's a very widely used platform. And I think what you're saying makes sense. Like, how far down do you want to take it? I mean, like, if I send you WhatsApp later on this evening after we get off the podcast, and I send you a WhatsApp and it's got something criminal in it, like, am I liable for sending that, or is WhatsApp liable because I happen to send it on their platform? It seems.
Am I liable for having it on my phone?
Well, that's a fascinating question, because if it was there's at least one case in the UK, I think, where somebody was prosecuted for having child abuse images when they hadn't done anything. They either hadn't passed. They hadn't. I can't remember the exact details, but they certainly hadn't gone looking for them. I don't know if somebody sent them. I'll look into the case. I don't want to give false information on the podcast, but the short answer is you may be. But why should WhatsApp be liable is the point. Or any other messaging platform. Like, it does seem like a massive case of state overreach, to be honest with you, which is all related to this ongoing panic around the far right and free speech. And they believe if they can take the platforms away, if they can shut down Twitter and Elon Musk, if they can shut down Telegram, if they can shut down anywhere else, that this will all go away. But, like, lads, you tried this already. You tried it with Facebook. Like, do you remember when Facebook used to be a place where you could you'd read everything and anything on Facebook, and then they was like, no, we're going to moderate this now, and then everybody left, and all that's left there now is old people looking at the photographs of their neighbor's niece's wedding. Like, it's partially, like, because people went and found another platform. So now they're coming after the other platforms, and they'll chase the platforms but never address the problem, which is your policies are unpopular and people are discontented.
But also that, like, people are gonna say stuff you don't like. You know, like, groups of people together talking, like I'm sure everybody listening to this is in multiple WhatsApp groups where, like, I don't know, people might say stuff you don't agree with, or, share stuff you don't like. You can't regulate human interactions. You can't make it illegal. And this is the thing, because I was actually having this conversation with somebody just when I was away about the hate speech bill. And I was like, tell me the scenario that this hate speech bill fixes that's not already covered by a law. So don't give me an example that's incitement to hatred. Don't give me an example that's stalking or anything like that. Give me an example of something that somebody says on the internet that you think isn't prosecutable now, that will be because of this. And they can never give an example, because all they ever do is say, people are saying this and people are inciting this. And no, that's already covered. So give me the example of the thing you want to make illegal, the speech, the tweet, the thing that you want to make illegal that isn't illegal already. And there is none, because no matter what you say, it sounds foolish.
But that's because the actual purpose of the law, and like the more honest liberal in favour of the hate speech bill who you'll meet will admit this to you. I know of at least one who said to me frankly in conversation that the whole point is the chilling effect.
Yeah.
The point is not to actually criminalize anything. It's to make people afraid to say things in case they might be criminal. Because, as my liberal friend put it to me, what is the harm in making people stop and think a little bit? If it makes them rephrase something in a less offensive way or in a more thoughtful way, what is the harm? If people are a little bit afraid to say the wrong thing, what is the harm? That was how this person genuinely approached. That's how he genuinely approached it. That was his. That was his justification for it. He was like, well, if it makes people a little bit afraid, so what? What's your answer?
My answer is, the problem there is that it's only one type of person you want to make afraid. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So it's not, and it never will be. And we all know it's not about. It's time we all sat down and had a hard look at ourselves or what we're saying on the internet that might be offensive to people. We want to chill the conversation of those people, that specific group of people, those views. We want to make you sit down and think before you have the courage to say, well, a person with a penis is a man. It's not. No one's sitting at home. No one's suggesting. No one even imagines in their wildest imaginings that it's actually going to have a chilling effect on the person who sits down and says, like, I'm a woman and there's nothing you can do about it. And if I go into the ladies' toilets, tough shit. No one's suggesting that's not on the agenda. The agenda is people like you and me. The agenda is people who say the hard things that nobody wants to say. So if I believed for a second that there was some possible proposal in the world, legal proposal, that would make every single person on all sides of the political spectrum, because the politics has become very split and very aggressive or whatever. If I thought there was something that would have a chilling effect on everybody and everybody would just calm their boots for a minute and think before they spoke, I go, okay, I mean, I wouldn't think it should be made illegal, but I'd be fine with it. But this is not what that is. And anybody who's pretending to think that this is what it is, this is, let's chill the conversation of the people we don't agree with. And the problem with that is that people we don't agree with will change. What's allowed to be said and what's not and whatever will change. And these people have absolutely no qualification to start monitoring or changing people's ability to speak, because they're not qualified to know what that will look like in a year, 5 years, 10 years. It's reckless. And they know it, you know it, and I know it. And it's a chilling effect. It's a bullshit argument. It's an argument they like. If that's what you think, keep telling yourself that, but you're on the wrong side of this.
It's funny, we think very similarly, because that's what I said back to my friend. I said to him, yeah, but it's not going to make, you say it's going to make people think twice, but like, I used the example of the people who walk through Dublin every third weekend or wherever it is, chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. There are many Jewish people in the world, and I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying they're right. This is not me being a Zionist.
Yeah.
There are many Jewish people in the world who say that's a genocidal chant. It incites hatred against our people. So I said to my friend, do you think the people who chant that will be thinking twice about chanting it after the hate speech bill is passed? And he just smiled and said, no, you got me. I did. Got him. Because it's true. Wouldn't be applied to that kind of thing in this country. Because, it doesn't matter that some people think that's hatred. Maybe they're wrong, but they think it's hatred. There are other people who think other things are hatred and they be taken seriously. So, like,
is it going to have a chilling effect on people? Is it going to have a chilling effect on people cycling naked through the city because that offends me? No.
Well, if that happens, then we'll pass it in the morning, won't we? Where do I sign? We're low on time.
Effect.
We're low on time.
Chilling effect.
We're low on time.
The operative phrase.
Yes, we're low on time, and there were two or three other things you want to talk about. You want to talk about childcare subsidies?
Just briefly, so because like credit where credit's due, government have changed the childcare subsidy as of Monday. So it used to be 50 cent an hour was the universal amount of money that you could claim back for childcare, and they've increased it to €2.14 an hour, which isn't a lot, but it actually works out for somebody like me. It actually works out at about €200 a month off a bill that is now, because I've mentioned on the podcast before, 1,000 because my daughter doesn't qualify for the 2 free preschool years because of her birthday. And Roderick O'Gorman came out and said that he believes that the 2 free preschool years should become a constitutional right, the same way as education, which is, sounds great, but kind of irritating for somebody like me when, they need to change it to that the parents select the 2 free preschool years as opposed to the birthday, because 2 of my kids only get 1 by virtue of their date of birth. But look, it's a bit of progress, and I slate the government plenty, so I'll give them credit where it's due on that one.
I'm sorry, that I hadn't heard that constitutional amendment idea. That's the greatest load of horse shit I think I've ever heard.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it should be in the constitution that the government has to give kids 2 years of preschool. I mean, why can't we just have governments who do it? Like, you're already doing it. You didn't need the constitution to do it. You're just trying to tie the hands of some future government who might look at it and say we have to cut it. That's not your job. The electorate's job is to do that. So anyway, it's another let's solve problems that aren't real thing. It's fascinating. The other thing I would look is that I had an undeveloped idea. I'm not going to share an undeveloped idea on the podcast lest I sound stupid. So
speaking of undeveloped ideas, here's the segue from me. Kamala Harris is finally going to do an interview. Kamala Harris is doing an interview, I think, our time tomorrow morning. So herself
before the weekend, yeah.
Before the weekend, I never understand the different times. But anyway, herself and Tim Waltz are sitting down to finally do an interview. So she's finally doing an interview just the 5 weeks after becoming the candidate. She has not done a press conference. She has not done a one-on-one interview, and she's finally doing one. So that'll be interesting. It'll be good to hear from her, what there's an election coming and all.
Yeah, I wonder how much this matters. I really do. I mean, it should matter. Don't get me wrong. It should matter. Absolutely it should matter. But like, how many people out there who are like saying she hasn't done an interview, she hasn't sat down, blah, blah. Many of those people are actually considering voting for her and are on the fence because of it. I'm not sure there are that many. I think the American press is so wholly behind her, so absolutely and entirely behind her, that first of all, if she loses, she'll never live it down. That's the first thing. But secondly, that I think if you and I were sitting in her campaign office, we'd be saying, yeah, I mean, first I'd be saying, like, because I tend to go for the bold ideas, I'd be saying you should do an interview and you should shut them all up. You should go on Fox News Sunday with Brett Baer or somebody really tough from the right and grill them. And if you survive it, no one will ask the question about interviews ever again. But that would be shot down in the room because people will say, why would you need to take that risk when we can just go on with Dan Bash?
But look, it's a beautiful, poetic, romantic, political idea.
What, my go on Fox News Sunday idea?
Yeah, no politician
in fairness,
would do that.
In fairness to Trump, and I'm always accused of being anti-Trump. Oh, you hate Trump. You have a problem with Trump.
And sometimes in the comments they say you have Trump derangement syndrome, and I'm like, guys, have you met someone who has Trump derangement syndrome? Like, you really don't.
Yeah. Anyway. Well, in fairness to Trump, he does that. There are a few things you can say about Trump that are really positive. The The first is that I don't think he's talking enough about energy. He's not talking, because that is the one big difference. So he's a campaign where there's very few differences on policy these days between the candidates. If you don't believe me, go look. There really aren't. He wants a wall, she wants a wall. He's pro-choice, she's pro-choice. He wants more spending, she wants more spending. Almost identical on policy right across the board, except on energy, where he would dramatically expand energy production and she would go down the green road of driving up prices. So I think he's a story to tell there that he's not telling particularly well. But also, the fact is, he's not afraid to walk into any interview and sit down and chew out the reporter if he doesn't like the questions and dominate a room. And I think that's part of his appeal for people. He's kind of like, he's the big dog and so on. But yeah, I find the campaign very interesting because people are so invested in it. They're and it's on both sides. Like people who believe the world will fall in if Donald Trump is elected, and people on the Trump side who feel like that it's full communism if she's elected. And yet, when you go through the policy platforms of both parties, I find it very funny as people talk about a uniparty. This is the uniparty. They have. Take the issue of abortion. You and I both campaigned in the abortion referendum in 2018. So we know what it's like to lose on that issue. But Trump is out there surrendering on it. And people will turn around and say to me, but John, he has to surrender on that. That would sink him in the election. That would absolutely do in his chances. Okay. But why should somebody like me support him then? Because what he's doing is, if he were to win, Sarah, with that strategy, if Donald Trump were to win this election, having run to the center ground on abortion and said, I support a woman's right to choose, I'll protect her reproductive rights and all that sort of stuff. I'm just using that issue as an example. Then why would any Republican candidate moving into the future ever do anything different ever? He would be marginalizing the pro-life movement entirely and for eternity, because he would have just said, we don't need you to win. We can shit on you for a height. And there's so many pro-lifers are going along with it, going, yeah, kick me harder, Donald. Kick me harder. It's insane. Anyway, they're similar on that. They're similar on immigration, actually. Now, you might say fairly, well, he actually believes what he's saying and she doesn't. Fair enough. Okay, we'll stipulate that. But as a voter, what is the difference? So it just seems to be an entirely big vibes election. But I think it's going to be fascinating who wins.
It's funny because obviously I was in Greece for the last few weeks, and I was talking to somebody I know who's he's American, she's Greek, they live in America, and they were in Greece where I was, and I was talking to them. They're both legal people, and they're like staunch Democrats, mad into Kamala, whatever. And I didn't want to be kind of rude to him. He was kind of talking, and he was like, oh, it's so nice to come here. She's from there, so it's so nice to come here and just get away from all the election and the whatever. And I was kind of trying to like politely kind of say to him, like a lot of people seem to forget, like Donald Trump was the president before and the world didn't cave in. And I feel like on your point is well made, like on both sides, if you're that invested, I always remember, and I found it perversely funny, but you remember when Hillary lost and there was that video of that woman at the, the center, whatever. I always remember forget the place where Hillary was supposed to have her.
Are you talking about the woman who went no when he was inaugurated? Or that was actually at his inauguration.
Was it?
Where
Sorry.
That was very funny.
I thought it was the election night.
It was actually after he formally takes the oath of office, they fired the 21 gun salute.
Yeah.
And it was like when the first gun went off and this woman dropped to her knees, like, no. Yeah. It was very funny. But yeah, it was there, not at although election night had its own meltdown, so it was most entertaining.
Yeah, but there's a kind of a video that's doing the rounds at the moment. People, I'm sure, have seen, or they can look it up, and it's a video of 3 girls sitting on the ground outside a Taylor Swift concert. Have you seen this? And the girl has posted it. She's like, when the song that saved my life comes on, right? And I can't even remember what the song's called. But this girl starts like screaming, crying, weeping. The other 2 girls have to hold her. It's this big dramatic scene, right? And it kind of reminds me of that. It's like, of course, you and I think that politics is very, very, very important. Okay. Clearly, we're doing a podcast about it. We talk about it all the time. We're political nerds. But at the same time, you shouldn't sort of knit your mental health into political outcomes, because it's a recipe for misery. If Donald Trump gets reelected, Donald Trump gets reelected. If Kamala gets elected, Kamala gets elected. The world won't fall in, there's more important things to life. And people get really, like, if you're screaming at the sky and you're becoming a meme, it's time to get yourself off the internet and down to a yoga class or something. I don't know, but chill. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's. I'm not saying it's not important. I know the comments will be, oh, there's this in America. I'm not saying it's not important, but you have to kind of.
Well, what I always find funny are the Irish people who get really annoyed with me over every time I write something critical of Donald Trump. And I keep saying, like, you know, we don't have votes. I'm not costing him any votes.
Yeah.
I'm not impacting his chances of winning the election. But I think people, and I do understand it to one extent, people kind of feel that because I'm the editor of Gript, and Gript is there to be a counterbalance to the establishment. And the establishment all hate Trump, therefore I should be counterbalancing.
Yeah.
I understand that. And to be fair, you know, as the election goes on, I fully intend to publish pieces making the case for Donald Trump. And you know, I won't write them necessarily, but I'll publish them. And I do think there are reasons for him. But at the same time, like, lads, chill out. I mean, not everyone has to agree on everything all the time. And we don't have votes. So, like, there's nothing we can do about it either way. Just sit back and watch what happens.
But it's also
it will be good fun.
But it's also not a betrayal. Like, I don't like Donald Trump or whatever, but like, I'm just consider myself, I'm able to say.
Tu Brute, not you, because I thought you would at least like him.
But the point is, I'm able to look at Donald Trump and say, he did this well, he did that well, he did that well, he did that well, without without vomiting into my lap. You know, like, it's not, it's you know, what I like to think, like, you're right about Gript, you know, like, challenges the narrative or whatever. But at the same time, we're just as bad as the other side if we're not able to have criticisms about people that we're supposedly on our side. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not a completely done deal that Donald Trump is this amazing guy. I'm allowed to say he did this well, and I'm allowed to say he didn't do that well. And same for you. It doesn't mean, you know what I mean? I think people just they become so polarized into their thing that I think they become so polarized into their side of the argument that they think it's a betrayal if you offer any criticism of anything. And I think that's the wrong way to go about things.
I think constructive criticism of your own side is vital. I mean, and that's I get into trouble for it a lot of the time. And by the way, like, people offer criticisms of me all the time, so it's not as if I can't take it. But I do think constructive criticism of your own side is really important, because it tells you what the real issues are. Because the other side are going to criticize you for everything you do.
Yeah.
Whereas if your own side is honest enough to go, no, actually, you know, when you think about it, this is a weakness, this is a problem. That's helpful. You're sticking your head in the sand and saying, no, we're the bestest, and if we don't win, it's rigged. My views on that, I think, are clear. We won't go on about it. Anyway, we'll leave it there for the week, I think. You and I are going shooting over the weekend, aren't we? We're going shooting clay pigeons.
I cannot wait.
I'll let people know next week who got more. Spoiler, it'll be me. But we'll find out if I'm wrong. All right, folks, listen, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in as ever. I've been John. She's been Sarah. That's been the week that really was, and we'll see you next week. Take care.